In a dramatic incident that has heightened tensions between the United States and China, a U.S. Navy destroyer collided with a Chinese naval vessel in the South China Sea. This event has significant implications for international relations and maritime security. Number 1. The collision incident. The collision incident occurred in the contentious South China Sea, a region known for its strategic importance and frequent naval operations. During a routine patrol, a U.S. Navy destroyer collided with a Chinese naval ship. Initial reports suggest that both vessels were engaged in standard maritime maneuvers when the incident happened. The collision caused significant damage to both ships, although no injuries were reported among the crew members. The exact circumstances leading to the collision are still under investigation by both navies. Preliminary findings indicate that the incident may have been caused by a combination of navigational errors and miscommunication. The South China Sea is heavily trafficked, and the proximity of naval vessels from different countries often leads to tense encounters. In this case, it appears that the standard protocols for avoiding collisions were not adequately followed. Witnesses reported that the U.S. destroyer was conducting freedom of navigation operations, a common practice by the U.S. Navy to challenge excessive maritime claims. The Chinese ship was patrolling the area, likely as part of its efforts to assert its territorial claims. The collision underscores the inherent risks of operating in such a contested environment. Naval experts highlight that the collision could have been avoided with better communication and adherence to international maritime rules. Both the U.S. and Chinese navies have established procedures for preventing such incidents, but the high-stress environment and close quarters can lead to mistakes. The investigation will likely focus on whether the rules of the road, the international regulations for preventing collisions at sea, were properly observed. This incident has raised concerns about the potential for escalation in the South China Sea. The region is a flashpoint for broader geopolitical tensions, and incidents like this can quickly become diplomatic crises. Both the U.S. and Chinese governments have called for calm and cooperation in the investigation, but the underlying strategic rivalry remains a significant factor. The collision also brings attention to the training and readiness of naval crews. Operating advanced warships requires precise coordination and situational awareness. Any lapse in these areas can lead to accidents. The incident will likely prompt both navies to review their training programs and operational procedures to prevent future occurrences. Number 2. Immediate response. Following the collision, both the U.S. and Chinese naval forces immediately activated their emergency protocols. The crews on both ships moved swiftly to assess the damage, stabilize the vessels, and ensure the safety of all personnel. Damage control teams were deployed to manage any breaches, flooding, or fires that might have resulted from the collision. Communication channels were opened to coordinate efforts between the two navies, ensuring that any potential hazards were quickly addressed. The U.S. Navy destroyer and the Chinese naval ship both initiated their respective damage control procedures, which include sealing off affected compartments, managing any potential flooding, and conducting immediate repairs to prevent further structural damage. Medical teams were on standby, ready to provide first aid or emergency medical care, although initial reports confirmed that there were no injuries among the crew members. In the aftermath, both navies issued official statements to the press and international community. The U.S. Navy emphasized their commitment to maritime safety and navigational freedom, reiterating the importance of maintaining open communication channels to prevent such incidents in the future. The Chinese Navy, on the other hand, stressed the need for mutual respect and adherence to established maritime protocols to ensure safe navigation in the contested waters of the South China Sea. Naval experts were called in to conduct a thorough investigation into the collision. This involved analyzing navigation logs, communication records, and radar data from both ships to determine the sequence of events that led to the incident. Both navies committed to a transparent investigation, seeking to identify any procedural failures or miscommunications that may have contributed to the collision. The immediate response also included diplomatic communications between the United States and China. High-level military and governmental officials engaged in discussions to manage the situation, aiming to de-escalate any potential tensions that could arise from the incident. These talks focused on reinforcing existing maritime agreements and exploring new measures to enhance the safety of naval operations in the South China Sea. On board both ships, the crews underwent stress debriefings and procedural reviews to ensure that they were prepared for any future emergencies. The collision served as a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of naval operations in contested waters, underscoring the importance of rigorous training and adherence to safety protocols. Number 3. Diplomatic reactions. The collision between a U.S. Navy destroyer and a Chinese naval ship has prompted immediate diplomatic efforts. The U.S. State Department quickly reached out to the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs to discuss the incident. Both governments emphasized the importance of maintaining open lines of communication to avoid further misunderstandings or conflicts. The discussions have focused on clarifying the circumstances that led to the collision and agreeing on steps to prevent similar incidents in the future. Tensions between the United States and China have been high, especially in the South China Sea, where territorial disputes are frequent. This incident adds another layer of complexity to their already strained relations. The U.S. reiterated its stance on freedom of navigation and the importance of following international maritime laws. China, on the other hand, stressed its territorial claims and the necessity of respecting its maritime boundaries. Both nations have sought to reassure their domestic audiences and international partners of their commitment to peace and stability in the region. The U.S. has been in close contact with its allies in the Asia-Pacific region, including Japan, Australia, and the Philippines, to update them on the situation and coordinate a unified response. Similarly, China has communicated with its partners to express its perspective on the incident. This diplomatic engagement has also involved high-level military-to-military talks. Senior naval officers from both countries have discussed the incident through established military communication channels. These talks aim to ensure that operational procedures are clarified and improved to avoid future collisions. There is an emphasis on enhancing maritime safety protocols and ensuring that both navies operate in a manner that reduces the risk of such dangerous encounters. The incident has brought attention to the broader strategic competition between the U.S. and China. Analysts suggest that both countries are using this opportunity to reinforce their strategic positions. The U.S. continues to promote the concept of a free and open Indo-Pacific, while China reiterates its claims over the South China Sea. This strategic messaging is aimed at both domestic and international audiences. There is also an element of public diplomacy at play. Both governments have used media outlets to communicate their positions and reassure the global community. The U.S. has highlighted the professionalism of its naval forces and their adherence to international norms. China has emphasized its right to defend its territorial waters and its commitment to peace. Number 4. Historical significance. The South China Sea holds immense strategic importance due to its vital shipping lanes, rich natural resources, and significant geopolitical stakes. The region has seen numerous naval confrontations, primarily due to overlapping territorial claims from multiple countries. China asserts sovereignty over nearly the entire South China Sea, marked by the 9-dash line, a demarcation line that overlaps with claims from Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan. This has led to frequent tensions and military standoffs. The United States, aiming to ensure freedom of navigation and challenge China's expansive claims, regularly conducts patrols and naval operations in the area. These operations are intended to affirm that these waters are international and not subject to any single nation's control. The recent collision between a U.S. Navy destroyer and a Chinese naval vessel is a stark reminder of the fraught nature of these encounters. This collision is particularly significant as it comes at a time when U.S.-China relations are already strained over various issues, including trade disputes, human rights concerns, and military posturing. The South China Sea, as a flashpoint, magnifies these tensions. Each incident in these waters carries the potential for broader geopolitical ramifications, potentially affecting global trade routes and regional security alliances. The historical context of the South China Sea disputes is rooted in its strategic value. The sea is a major conduit for global trade, with approximately 1/3 of the world's shipping passing through its waters. It also holds vast reserves of oil and natural gas, making it economically significant. Control over these waters translates to substantial economic and strategic advantages. China's extensive land reclamation activities and the construction of military installations on artificial islands have further complicated the situation. These moves have been met with international condemnation and have prompted increased military presence from other countries, particularly the United States, which sees these actions as attempts to militarize the region and alter the status quo. The collision thus underscores the volatile nature of the South China Sea. It highlights the ongoing power struggle between a rising China, eager to assert its dominance, and the United States, striving to maintain its influence and uphold international maritime laws. Each confrontation, each patrol, and each diplomatic maneuver adds to the historical tapestry of a region defined by its strategic significance and the competing interests it attracts. Number 5. Naval operations and risks. Naval operations in disputed waters such as the South China Sea present numerous risks. The collision between a U.S. Navy destroyer and a Chinese naval vessel underscores these dangers. The presence of multiple naval forces, often with competing interests, increases the likelihood of incidents. One of the primary risks is the high density of naval and commercial traffic. The South China Sea is a critical shipping route, and the sheer volume of vessels navigating these waters complicates maneuvering. The close quarters in which these ships operate elevate the risk of collisions, particularly when military vessels engage in complex maneuvers. Naval vessels often conduct operations to assert territorial claims or demonstrate freedom of navigation. These actions can involve aggressive maneuvers, such as closely shadowing other ships, which heightens the potential for accidents. For instance, vessels may engage in high-speed transits or sudden course changes, actions that require precise coordination and situational awareness. Communication between ships is crucial to preventing incidents, yet language barriers and differing naval protocols can hinder effective communication. Each navy operates under its own set of rules and procedures, which may not always align with those of other countries. This can lead to misunderstandings and miscalculations, as seen in previous naval encounters. The geopolitical context further exacerbates these risks. The South China Sea is a contested region with overlapping territorial claims from several nations. The strategic importance of the area means that naval forces are often on high alert, ready to respond to perceived threats. This heightened state of readiness can contribute to a tense operational environment where the margin for error is slim. Technological factors also play a role. Modern naval vessels are equipped with advanced radar and communication systems, but these technologies can sometimes fail or provide misleading information. In high-stress situations, even minor technical issues can lead to significant consequences. Training and preparedness are essential to mitigating these risks. Naval crews undergo rigorous training to handle emergencies, but the dynamic and unpredictable nature of naval operations in contested waters can challenge even the most well-prepared personnel. Continuous training and simulation exercises are necessary to ensure that crews can respond effectively to real-world incidents. Number 6. Comparative naval tactics. The U.S. Navy's freedom of navigation operations, FONOPs, are a key element of its strategy in the South China Sea. These operations are designed to challenge excessive maritime claims and assert the principle that all nations have the right to navigate through international waters. The U.S. bases its actions on international maritime law, specifically the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, which permits innocent passage through territorial seas and freedom of navigation in exclusive economic zones. In contrast, the Chinese Navy's operations in the South China Sea focus on enforcing China's territorial claims. China asserts sovereignty over much of the South China Sea through the Nine-Dash Line, a demarcation that overlaps with claims from other countries in the region. The Chinese Navy regularly patrols these waters, conducts military exercises, and builds artificial islands equipped with military installations to bolster its claims. The difference in naval tactics between the U.S. and China often leads to confrontations. U.S. FONOPs are seen by China as provocative acts that undermine its sovereignty, while the U.S. views China's militarization of the South China Sea as a threat to freedom of navigation and regional stability. These operations can involve close encounters, where ships from both navies maneuver in proximity, raising the risk of collisions or other incidents. The U.S. Navy employs a strategy of persistent presence and routine patrols to maintain its influence in the region. This approach is intended to reassure allies and deter potential aggressors by demonstrating the U.S. commitment to upholding international law. These operations are typically accompanied by public statements that emphasize the importance of free and open access to the world's oceans. The Chinese Navy, meanwhile, uses a combination of patrols, infrastructure development, and strategic ambiguity to assert control over the contested areas. By maintaining a constant presence and enhancing its capabilities through the construction of military facilities on disputed islands, China aims to create a de facto control over the region. This strategy also includes leveraging civilian maritime militia and Coast Guard vessels to assert its claims without direct military engagement. These differing approaches reflect broader strategic goals. The U.S. seeks to preserve a rules-based international order and prevent any single nation from dominating key maritime regions. China's strategy aims to establish its dominance in the South China Sea and secure its interests in a region vital to its economic and security needs. Number 7. Global impact. The collision between a U.S. Navy destroyer and a Chinese naval vessel has captured international attention, sparking concern among global allies and partners. Japan has voiced its alarm over the incident, highlighting the importance of maintaining peace and stability in the South China Sea. As a close ally of the United States and a key player in regional security, Japan views the incident as a potential threat to maritime security and the rules-based international order. Australia has similarly expressed its apprehension. As a nation with significant trade routes passing through the South China Sea, Australia emphasizes the need for a peaceful resolution to prevent disruptions in maritime traffic. The Australian government has reiterated its support for freedom of navigation and overflight in international waters, stressing the importance of adherence to international maritime laws. The Philippines, a claimant in the South China Sea disputes, has also reacted with concern. The Philippine government has called for restraint from all parties involved, urging diplomatic dialogue to resolve the tensions. Given its strategic location and vested interest in the region, the Philippines closely monitors developments, wary of any actions that could escalate into broader conflicts. The European Union has issued statements underscoring the need for de-escalation and dialogue. The EU, which has economic and strategic interests in the Asia-Pacific region, supports a rules-based approach to maritime disputes. The incident has prompted EU officials to advocate for greater international cooperation to ensure the stability of critical sea lanes. India, maintaining a strategic presence in the Indo-Pacific, has watched the situation with caution. India's naval operations in the region align with its broader goals of maintaining regional stability and securing maritime trade routes. The collision reinforces India's call for adherence to international law and freedom of navigation. Russia, with its own interests in the Asia-Pacific, has urged both the U.S. and China to exercise caution. As a major global power with strategic alliances and interests in the region, Russia's stance highlights the interconnected nature of global maritime security concerns. The incident has also impacted global markets, with fluctuations observed in shipping and trade sectors. The potential for increased naval activity and the risk of further confrontations have prompted businesses to reassess the security of their maritime logistics. Number 8. Potential outcomes. The collision between a U.S. Navy destroyer and a Chinese naval vessel could prompt several potential outcomes. One immediate effect may be an intensified diplomatic push to establish clearer communication channels and enhance operational protocols. This would involve high-level meetings and negotiations aimed at reducing the risk of future collisions. Both navies might agree on specific procedures for interactions in contested waters, possibly including joint communication drills and emergency response exercises. Another potential outcome is the strengthening of naval alliances. The U.S. might seek to bolster its partnerships with other nations in the region, such as Japan, Australia, and the Philippines, through joint naval exercises and increased military cooperation. This could serve as a deterrent to further aggressive actions and reassure allies of U.S. commitment to regional security. Conversely, the incident could lead to a more assertive naval presence by both the U.S. and China in the South China Sea. This heightened activity might involve more frequent patrols, surveillance missions, and potentially the deployment of additional naval assets. Such actions would likely increase the risk of further incidents, as both sides demonstrate their resolve to uphold their respective claims and interests. The collision might also trigger a review of rules of engagement for both navies. The US and China could revise their operational guidelines to include stricter measures for avoiding collisions, such as mandatory buffer zones or enhanced radar tracking capabilities. These changes would aim to minimize the likelihood of accidental encounters in the future. Economic implications are another possible outcome. Increased tensions in the South China Sea could impact global trade routes, leading to higher shipping insurance premiums and potential disruptions in the supply chain. Businesses and maritime operators might seek alternative routes to avoid the contentious waters, thereby affecting the flow of goods and increasing transportation costs. There could also be a shift in regional power dynamics. Countries in Southeast Asia might leverage the incident to negotiate stronger security agreements with either the US or China, depending on their strategic interests. This could result in a realignment of regional alliances and a redefinition of security policies. On the international stage, the collision could influence the strategies of other global powers. Nations like India and Russia, with vested interests in the Indo-Pacific region, might adjust their naval operations and diplomatic efforts in response to the evolving situation. This could lead to a more complex and multifaceted geopolitical landscape. The media and public perception will play a role as well. Coverage of the incident could sway public opinion in both countries, potentially leading to increased nationalistic sentiments and pressure on governments to adopt more hardline stances. This public pressure might influence the pace and nature of diplomatic negotiations and military responses.